Before we get into today's show, I want to invite you into a brand new free community that I've created called, the Think Unbroken community. If you are lost, if you're struggling, if you just need a little bit more support right now, especially with how crazy the world is, I invite you to come and join the free community, where not only is it a place to connect with other people, your peers, and myself who are on this healing journey, but I'll also be hosting a live monthly Q&A coaching session, again, for free. Communities for free, access is for free, 1 time per month coaching for free. All of this just because I really want to create a deeper connection and bond with you, the listeners of this podcast, who I appreciate more than I could ever tell you. All you need to do is just click the link in the description of today's episode, or go over to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com and click the link for community. Come and join us. I'll see you there. You're listening to the Think Unbroken podcast, and I'm your host, Michael Unbroken. I'm an author, speaker, coach, and advocate for adult survivors of childhood trauma and abuse. In this podcast, you will learn how to transform your trauma into triumph, turn breakdowns into breakthroughs, and go from victim to being the hero of your own story. You can learn more at thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, and of course, check us out on Apple Podcasts and Spotify at Think Unbroken Podcast. We live in one of the most disconnected times probably in human history, where our mind, our bodies, our spirits are totally not only disconnected, but we don't even know how to get them back connected if we tried. And one of the things that I think about a lot is, where does the disconnect turn into dis-ease, which turns into dis-ease? So many of us, even though we're doing the work and you listen to podcasts like this, you're missing the most important, crucial part of the healing journey. And that is to get to the place where you live in peace, have better health, but most importantly, to address all of the root causes of the chaos, the chronic illness, and all of the trapped energy that's probably holding you back. I'm super excited for today's conversation with my great friend, Kristine, as we are going to dive into and explore exactly how to get you unstuck. My friend, welcome to the podcast.
Michael, I'm so excited to be here with you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. First and foremost, the same question I ask everyone: why should anyone listen to our conversation today?
I think, in terms of the method that I've developed, it's pretty revolutionary in terms of being able to help people heal the emotional underlying root cause of every illness, which truly is what holds us back from achieving our greatest, living our best life and achieving our greatest accomplishments. Our bodies are literally the barometer to our subconscious mind. And our subconscious mind is what's running the show 95% of the time, which is good, because if it wasn't, we wouldn't breathe when we were sleeping. However, it's really hard to access all of the stuff that is stuck in that subconscious mind without having some help getting there. And my method is one of those ways that helps bring that from the subconscious to the conscious so it can be released.
It's powerful. Yeah. And that's something, these blockages that we face, they're so deeply rooted in us. It's wild to me how you could go and translate an experience that happened when you were 5 or 7 or 12 years old, and then you're 54, and that one experience that probably would impact almost no people has kept you with your back against the wall, unable to have a healthy and fulfilling relationship, a successful career, to take care of your health, to not sabotage, and so on and so forth. But I'm sure, like me, anyone turns into becoming a healer because of their own journey. And so before we break down the method, we talk a little bit more about what people can actually do. I think it's really important to create context and understanding how you got to where you are. So first and foremost, I think one of the more important things that we can dive into is your story, your journey. So what is it that happened and transpired in your life that led you down the path of having to do this work yourself?
Oh gosh, right? Where do we start? You mentioned something that totally sparked, sort of my own awareness. I think when we have like these repetitive thoughts, they become beliefs, right? So I think people are familiar with the expression self-limiting beliefs. And we were talking about something from childhood. I grew up with an alcoholic parent. And so in order to get attention, I couldn't just meet expectations. I had to exceed them. So I had this belief that whatever I did was never good enough, which served me extremely well in my corporate career as a corporate turnaround specialist, right? I was always meeting or exceeding expectations, helping to turn companies around, you know, trying to get people, process, technology all to flow to achieve the business outcomes. So that served me extremely well. But in my personal life, not so well. What it did is it attracted partners that where I would be in a position where I had to overdo and they would underdo. And it took me a very long time, to realize how that self-limiting belief, although it served me in one way, it was really holding me back in another. And,
Mhm.
I think in terms of how did this method come about, what was sort of the crux of my healing, why I brought it forth to the world, it really was formed out of my career in corporate America. I had my own health crisis at one point, and I realized why it occurred. But it always happens after the fact, right? So I, grew up during a time when women hit their head on the glass ceiling, and I probably have more cuts than most at the top of my head. But always feeling like I had to do as much or better than any of the men that I worked with just to get ahead, just to get paid, close, right? Even I remember going back as far as like college, feeling like I had to carry 2 cases of beer up 2 flights of stairs just to prove to the guys that I could do it, silly stuff like that. But I grew up thinking that in corporate America, I needed to act like a man and be like a man. So I would speak crassly. I would, make sure I knew all the sports statistics. I wanted to be one of the guys. I'd make fun of anybody that was emotional or cried at work, just crazy stuff. And I had pushed my femininity so far down that I had a checkup at the OBGYN to find out that I had some abnormal cells that needed to come out. So they did an in-office procedure. And then the in-office procedure came back and said, well, there's too many of those abnormal cells. We need to do a conical biopsy, and that has to be scheduled in the hospital. I'm like, what? And when someone mentions the cancer word to you, that's, your whole body goes into that fight or flight and oh my God, right? And so I, at that moment, was like, well, what am I going to do? I got to fix this. But I was so disconnected from my body at that point. I said, well, I'm done having kids. We'll just take my parts out. I'm like, wow, when I think about that now, I went to just pretty much every healer I could think of, right? Acupuncturists, energy workers, psychics. And I finally had someone say something to me that really landed. And they said, you're totally out of touch with your divine feminine. And at the time, I was like, well, what the heck does that mean? Does that mean I got to wear dresses, grow my hair out, dance? What do you mean disconnected from your divine feminine? And I finally came to realize what it meant was I had pushed my femininity so far down, it went to my cervix, which is the uterus, right? That is our sacral chakra, the second chakra, where we birth babies and we birth businesses. We bring life into the world. It's also where, men's seat of manhood resides, in the prostate, which is really fascinating when you think about what the prostate represents, right? The purpose. And so many men who retire lose their sense of purpose and contract prostate cancer, right? That's where it holds. That's where the energy goes. So I started to research all of these incredible, strong female leaders throughout history, and went back as far as ancient times in Egypt, and researched Isis and Sekhmet and all of these strong females, and people like Joan of Arc and other leaders. And I started to recognize, oh, being a woman isn't weak, right? There's strength in being a woman. As a matter of fact, we endure an awful lot of pain in our lives, even just through childbirth. And so it was really embracing that femininity. And then I started to do all the work, the inner work. I started to see my cells vibrating healthy. I started to imagine that it got my attention and I solved the problem. I didn't need to focus on it anymore. And I had a girlfriend say to me, and an energy worker, a healer, it won't be there. By the time you go and get the operation done, it's not going to be there. And I went, yeah, I agree with that. I'm going to make that happen. And so I did the meditation, I did the prayer, I did all of the things that I know to do that I now call tapping into my soul intelligence. And sure enough, I went and had the operation done. And I will never forget the look of the OBGYN's face when she walked out. And she just said to me, "We must have cut it all out. It's gone." And I said, "Yeah, we must have." Now, was it physical? Was it mental? Was it emotional? The answer is yes. It's all of that. And when we talk about healing holistically, that's what we're talking about. And that's why 95% of all office visits today to doctors' offices are for chronic conditions, things that just won't heal. And that's because we're not getting to the underlying root cause, right? Which is really energy, and emotion is energy in motion. And as we started the podcast, when energy pools in the body, that's when it causes dis-ease or dysfunction or dissonance in your frequency. And that's when you have to go and see somebody.
You know, one of the things about myself that I have discovered over the years is I'm not woo-woo, but I have these little pockets of it where I'm like, okay, yeah, there's some woo here. And I think that served me well. Like, I won't go into detail, but there's certain things where I'm like, this is nonsense. There's no way this is real. And there's other things that I do where I'm like, oh yeah, this transformed my life. The power of belief, in my opinion, is one of the strongest powers that we hold.
Absolutely.
It is without question, because and I've always said this, people always ask me kind of, well, what's the crux of Think Unbroken? What's the framework of all of this thing? And I'm like, it's very simple. It comes down to defining this terminology that I call mindset, right? Which we all call mindset, but I just don't know that many of us have done a good job about explaining what it means. And for me, it means what you think becomes what you speak become your actions, and your actions become your reality, right? And this is one of those things that as we explore it more deeply, you start to really understand that your mind, not your brain, your mind holds so much control over what's possible in your life. But when we have these deeply rooted, planted seeds about what it is that we are, how we earn love, not our given love, not unconditional love, but how we have to earn love, how in fact that even our best accomplishments will always be overshadowed and will never be enough. There is this tremendous amount of work that one has to do to effectively unshackle yourself from the anchor of that. And I think that that's one of the big reasons people listen to this show, is because we are very often shackled to the past. That experience, which I share with you, of having an alcoholic parent, that still shows up 30, 40 years later, right? It still shows up in relationships, in friendships, in career. And then we have levels to this. I always say there's levels to this game, right? And depending on your background, you know, if you know the ACE research, adverse childhood experiences, I mean, depending on where you land in that, you got a hell of a ride in front of you, right? But the one thing that I know, as someone who has a score of 10, it's like I look at my life and I think, okay, if I take control over the things that are in front of me and I start with my mind, what can I do? But it's so difficult to even get to that. And you talked about this, when you're disconnected from your body.
Yes.
Right. And so as you're in this and you want to see yourself healthy, you want to see yourself letting go of chronic conditions, you want to be in an amazing relationship, you want to be successful in business, you might want all of these things, but there's the blockage, right? There's this thing in front of you, the wall. I often think of it like standing outside in a sunny day and there's just a cloud in front of all of the things that you want, until you recognize that there is a way to navigate it. So as someone who walked this path of having an alcoholic parent into the professional career that you had, of really, I mean, you're a performance-based metric. You want to be loved in business, you have to perform. Like, you kind of put yourself in this perfect scenario. And I think a lot of us feel like we have to perform in order to feel love, to receive joy, to have happiness, whatever it is. How do you get to this space of, I'm going to use the word allowance, even though it's not really the word that you used, that you didn't use that word, but there's something true about it. Like, when you can allow yourself to have these things, that's when life changes. Like, you have to allow yourself to believe that you can think yourself into health, right?
Absolutely.
So how the hell do you do this, right? Because I know there's somebody struggling right now and they're like, I hear this, but I'm trapped and I've tried all the things. nothing's working. It's gray. It's not sunny. I don't feel successful. None of the relationships are working. I'm 30, I'm 40, I'm 50. It's the same old song and dance. Where do I start?
It's a great question. The short answer would be, we'll have a soul intelligence session, but I'm going to give you something you can do on your own. Um, in terms of what it really is, it's kind of like if I go back to The Secret, right? Do you remember the book The Secret or the movie The Secret? Okay.
Mhm.
And that
Yeah.
talked about positive affirmations, right? That's the first part. That's the intention, the idea. You have to have that in the mind. Like, what is it that you truly seek? But where it fell short was, that's the electric part of the electromagnetic field, by the way, the electric spark, the masculine piece of it, the idea, the intention. But what magnetizes things to you and brings things into you, collapses that particle wave in the quantum field, is emotion. And when you think about, the Heart Math Institute has done extensive research on the electromagnetic field that emanates from your heart. That is 6 foot wide. The electromagnetic field that emanates from our brain is 2 foot wide. So the heart is infinitely more powerful. And so the reason why The Secret didn't work is feeling. And Neville Goddard actually got it right. He said feeling is the secret, which is true. And so it's really about the heart and mind coherence. Okay, so you have to seed the field of intention with what you want, and then you have to use that emotion of already having gotten it, achieved it, to bring that in and manifest it. And I use a tool that's a free tool that I have on my website. It's called the Sacred Soul Script. But essentially, it is about brainwashing yourself for good, because you got to use the 5% of your mind to convince the 95% what's really going on. And the cool thing about the subconscious mind is it doesn't know time. It knows emotions and feelings and beliefs. And that's where it's stored. That's also where we store all of our old trauma and old patterns and all of those things that we talk about that need to come up from the subconscious to the conscious to be released. Because everyone and everything is energy, right? We know this from science class back in grade school. We're all electrons, neutrons, protons vibrating in this electromagnetic field. But just because we don't see it doesn't mean it's not there, right? How I'm seeing you right now via Zoom is an energy transfer. How people are listening to this podcast, streaming it down from 5G, is an energy transfer. Just because we don't see the energy doesn't mean it's not there. And I think people forget that we're these energetic beings, right? Because we're physical, we're corporal. So the way you brainwash yourself for good, okay, or use my sacred soul script, is you write down everything that you ever wanted, whatever that is for you, okay, your ideal vision, the ideal relationship, all of that stuff that you're looking for, and you write it as if it's already happened, okay? So pick a timeline that feels good. Like a year out is always a good one, right? A year from now, write about all the experiences you had, the trips you took, the people you were with, the relationships you had, the job achievements, all of the things, and write it with a lot of emotion and feeling. And then what you do is you either reread that, or you visualize it, or if you're artistic, you paint it every morning and every evening. The idea of brainwashing, if we just look at what you need to do it, you isolate people, you control the messaging, you repeat the messaging, and you reward with love or fear. So when you're doing this for good, as opposed to maybe back in 2020, what we all experienced, okay, the converse, you're going to set yourself, be by yourself for a little while. You're going to control those messages to your subconscious mind. And the reason why I say every morning and every evening is because that's when the subconscious is most available to us, right? When we're going into sleep or coming out of sleep. And then you reward yourself with those feelings of gratitude and joy and love and worthiness and all the things that you're going to feel when you're there. And I actually had what I call my, forgive me, holy shit moment about a year ago, when I realized I literally was living my sacred soul script. I was literally living in that version of me, the best self of me. I had a vision where I was standing in Times Square. I'm originally from New York City. And I was standing in Times Square and I was looking up at the Good Morning America ticker tape, knowing I had just come from an interview. a TV interview, and then I was about to get on a plane to negotiate a book deal and turning my book into a movie. And I was on a plane flying out to LA, going to record the Audible version of my book. It had been published and had been asked to be in a movie, which I am, which is so exciting. And I just went, and I have had just in October, I had a book tour, the Soul in the City book tour, where I had a billboard in Times Square. So does it come in exactly as you write it? No. But holy cow, when you start seeing you're living the life that you have programmed your subconscious mind into materializing and collapsing those particle waves in the field, it brings it into you. You magnetize it to you. And so many of us chase, right? We chase what we want instead of magnetizing those things to us and bringing and collapsing time by bringing it to us sooner.
So now I'm going to push you because I want to unvelop this, or uncover this, I should say, unravel this a little bit deeper.
Sure.
Because many of the things you've experienced, I've also experienced. It's been amazing. I was 18 years old. I was in New York City. I said, one day I'll be on a billboard in Times Square. I ended up doing it twice in 1 year. I said I'd be a best-selling author. Cool. In my 20s, I became a best-selling author. I've now written 4 books. I said, almost 10 years ago, I said I'm going to have one of the biggest podcasts in the world. And, while we have never been number 1 in America, it's hard to beat that Rogan guy. I mean, we have been 12, and I have been number 1 in like 30 countries, right? And so we're still pushing. I still see like the visions. But what I want to do is I want to explore this from the aspect of maybe somebody who they have the vision, but something is still missing. There's still that interference. So they hear us and they're like, well, good for you guys. But I believe I'm going to have X. I believe I'm going to have Y. I believe it, but it's not wholly within me. There's something that's in the way. And so I wrote the question like this because I wanted to ask it the right way. What if you write it, but you just don't actually believe what you're writing because you have so much apathy, depression, or indifference to your own success?
That's exactly the challenge. You've got it. That's exactly it, right? We have to get rid of our previous conditioning, and we have to focus on the new reality and who we are. We have to kind of look at that as that's the old me. Here's the new me, or the best version of ourselves, or our higher self, depending on how you look at it. Because when I speak, I try and talk about science, right? Because spirituality can be divisive at times. And so the science of my method is founded in something called bioenergetics. That was documented in the 1950s by Dr. Alexander Lowen. And what it says is how you feel physically. Basically, there's a correlation between your physical well-being and your mental and emotional well-being, which says if physically you're not feeling great, mentally, emotionally, you're probably not doing so hot, and vice versa. So one of the first things you have to do is to change your internal state, right? And I think people need to recognize their external world is truly a reflection of what's going on the inside. And so if you've got a lot of trauma, if you've got a lot of those beliefs, if you've got a lot of those negative energies and emotions, old patterns, and you've struggled and you've tried all the things, honestly, potentially doing a soul intelligence session can help you figure out what it is that's causing it and holding it in place so that we can bring that up and out so that you can start to manifest the way you want to. Truly, that's the power of the method that I've put together. It really helps people get to those things because often we don't know, right? Somatic therapy asks you to go into your body and kind of feel, and where do you feel the discomfort in your body, and put a color to it, put a shape to it, but we don't always know what's underneath that. Even people who've gone to therapy for years, right? They cried it out. They slammed the pillow. They moved the energy up and out, the emotion up and out. And then they find later that they're still attracting the same kind of partner because they truly haven't healed. They might have healed an experience, but they haven't healed the repetitive pattern that caused it in the first place. And so it's figuring out what those things are so that they don't hold you back anymore, so that you don't see yourself in the same old conditioning, that you're not invisible in a relationship, or you don't carry the feeling that you are alone. Therefore, you continue to look for experiences where you don't find partnership. So to your point, those thoughts become those repetitive beliefs, and then that clouds your vision and the way in which you see the world and operate in the world.
Okay, so I have this hypothesis that I guess I've proven it, so it is still slightly anecdotal. And the hypothesis is this: if you just do the shit, the thoughts will fix themselves. And so the reason why I say this is because we get so caught up in the idea of the if then, right? If this happens, then that will happen. If this happens, then that will happen. And what I came to realize, so I'll put it in this context. 10 years ago, I guess longer than that now, I'm getting older. 14 years ago, 15 years ago, I was 350 pounds. Okay. I was smoking 2 packs a day, drinking myself to sleep, partying every night, just in a completely disastrous quarter life crisis. What I found is that, and I've said this on the show many, many times before, if I could go back in time, I would have hired a coach before I hired a therapist.
Yes.
Why? Because I felt like it's the action that needed to change. Because the beliefs, those started to change in parallel with the action. Because here's what's really funny. People will come up with this notion or idea. They're like, I'm going to go to the gym tomorrow. I am going to eat healthy tomorrow. I'm not going to smoke tomorrow. I'm not going to drink tomorrow. I'm not going to cheat on my husband or wife tomorrow. Tomorrow I'm going to go and I'm going to work really hard at work and I'm going to do all the things. And tomorrow I'm going to believe that it's sunshine and rainbows. And then tomorrow comes, because of the pattern and nothing changing in the behavior, they go back to that thing of tomorrow. What I realized that it was about interrupting the pattern with the behavior immediately. Because if I look at it like this, standing in front of a door, and this is the terminology that I've used many times over the years, standing in front of the door of everything that you want, and instead of knocking, you have to kick the fucking door in. Because there's something about the experience of the action and shaking everything about who you know about yourself to the core that changes you. So when I'm 26, I'll never forget this. There's a hot yoga studio. I had privately, in secret, been doing yoga for like 4 or 5 months. Because this is Indiana in the early 2000s. Like nobody did, like a dude especially was not doing it, right? And so maybe in fucking California or New York, but not in India. And so this hot yoga studio opens up and I'd have to drive past it sometimes. And I kept saying to myself, one day I'm going to go in there. One day I'm going to go in there. And then the one day finally came. God knows how many one days it was, but the day finally came. And as I sat in the parking lot, I just watched all of these really fit, like sexy looking people walking in. And I'm still at that point, probably 320 pounds. Like I'm still really heavy. And I distinctly remember being like, nope, motherfucker, go in. That's just, that was my narrative. And again, I speak to myself differently than a lot of people because I come from a different background than a lot of people.
Sure.
But in that moment, something shifted in me because it was the first time I touched deep discomfort, not in this bad way, but you said something really important about getting rid of previous conditioning. And for me, that's how I did it. It was through the action. And then I've now practiced yoga for 15 years. So I'm creating all this context to ask this. Am I an anomaly in just my own personal experience? Is the thesis that I believe, the hypothesis to be, if you take the appropriate action first, the mind will follow? Or is it that you have to recondition the mind in order to take the appropriate action? You said the reality is we have to get rid of our previous conditioning. Well, are we getting rid of the conditioning starting mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually first? In what order? And then what do we do about it? Because I see what you're saying, but I want people to be able to hear what we're talking about right now, recognize where they're conditioned, and create a pattern interrupt now. So where do they start?
That's a great question. I think it depends on the individual and where they're at, right? You can start with the mind, you can start with the heart, and you can start with the body. So I think, because we're talking about your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. So I think it depends on the individual. But in addition to doing all of the work, as I just mentioned, right? Writing it down, seeing it, visualizing it every morning, you have to take what I call inspired action, right? What's the first step? And it's even through prayer and meditation that you can ask, what's my next step? What's my first step? What do I need to do in order to shift this? And if you get in touch with your soul intelligence, your inner knowing, you're going to hear that, right? I needed to, for example, when I discovered soul intelligence, it came out of a lot of pain. It was March of 2020, and I was on my last corporate turnaround. I really thought I was going to retire from that company. And I happened to be at a doctor's office with my now husband, who was getting a biopsy on his prostate. And I got a call from the head of HR letting me know that my services were no longer needed. I was like, what? I had just gotten a performance bonus. We had just made the turn. We were on year one of a planned 3-year turnaround. I knew exactly where we were. And I was like, this is insane. I've never been fired in my entire life. The overachiever? What? So, I went through my panic stages and I texted my boss, the COO, and I said, I just got fired. He goes, me too. I'm like, what? So essentially what happened, I had been asking to hire staff in the fourth quarter of the year in order to meet the marketing spend in the first quarter. And I kept getting told, no, we can't do that. We have to hold the line on expenses. So we had put the board deck together. It was a Thursday when this happened. I'll never forget the day. And we had prepared the board deck. We had a board meeting on Monday. And so what the CEO did is he read the board deck, saw that had we been able to hire the number of people we had asked for, we not only would have met the Q1 projections, we would have exceeded them. So what he did is he got rid of me and the COO, walked into the boardroom with our deck, and went on a hiring spree. And there was a board investigation. Karma always has a way of working it out. He was removed from office, but he put a crony in after he stepped down, and they summarily ran the company into the ground. But what happened to me? So after getting through all the feels, like all the shock, all the things that you go through when you go through a loss or a trauma like that, I did a lot of prayer and meditation, and I was fortunate enough to have a nice exit package that gave me about a 9-month runway to figure it out. It was the height of COVID. Nobody was hiring anyway. Everyone's trying to figure out, how do we work from home? Now, I had always worked from home and traveled, so I wasn't super freaked out about that possibility. But to be in my early 50s, fired for the first time in my life, with a husband who was just diagnosed with prostate cancer, and I was the breadwinner with the benefits, that's a pretty scary thing to have happen. So I really feel now, looking back, that the divine plucked me out of corporate America. I had this incredible meditation where I had tears streaming down my face, and I knew that it was time for me to do something different. And, Brandon Burchard describes this as, people operate for many years in their zone of excellence, right? Where people see you as this person. You identify, I identified as this crazy, plane hopping adrenal junkie corporate executive. I loved the chase. I loved going after, figuring out what was wrong so I could get the company to operate at its highest level, the people, the process, the technology. I thrived in it. I was paid well for it. People liked me in it because I did well. And you get stuck in that zone of excellence for a long time. And then something happens where you maybe you're just not as satisfied anymore. You don't know why you're just not getting the same thrill out of doing what you've been doing. And truly, when I did that incredible meditation, I knew I couldn't go back into corporate America. And I knew it was time for me to step into my zone of genius, which is really what I'm bringing to the world now. But that's, it was a big deal to come out of the spiritual closet, right? I'm like used to being this very grounded businesswoman, and then realize, oh, I've got a bigger mission in the world. I'm to bring mental and emotional wellness to help people heal from the inside out. And I needed to be quiet and quiet my mind enough to hear my soul intelligence in order to allow the method to kind of come through me, right? And it's the same feeling when you're writing, or for me it is. It feels like it's an inspired message that's coming through me when I'm working with a person in a session or through the book. And so what I did is after the method came through me, and it's basically developing a book of charts that allows me to discern information, and all kinds of charts, negative energies, emotions, and beliefs, archetypes, self-limiting beliefs, work charts, blocks, body, physical charts. There's all kinds of charts that I use. What I realized, through that is that I was able to help people heal on a deeper level. And so I stepped into a brand new industry, but I had to make the crossover of people identifying me as this corporate executive, and how do I introduce this scientific yet spiritual way of healing into my work. So I put my toe in the water. I put together a leadership program, so a quarter's worth of time. So give me 12 weeks, give me your middle managers, your senior leaders, your executives. I'll get them ready for the C-suite. I'll get them ready for their next level. And the way I pitched it to CEOs, I went to my network and I shared that I developed this program. I want to work with your leaders. And I talked to them about, wouldn't you love to have an entire company full of people who are totally in line with their mission, their vision, their values, their purpose, and they feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves? Those are the people that are going to run through the fire for you. Your company is going to excel without a doubt. And so every CEO I talked to said yes. And so what I did is, in this group program, I'd have leaders on a call in a group session. I would infuse 3 one-on-ones. The first one, I use this really cool tool out of the UK called the Game Changing Index, which talks about where you naturally put your energy, what intrinsically motivates you. Super cool tool. And then the midpoint was kind of measuring against how the program was working, what changes showed up at work, how have we been achieving your goals, kind of checking in. And then the last session, I would do a couple weeks before the end of the program, because I've infused my magic kind of through the whole program. I would say to them, would you like a regular coaching session where we talk about everything you're going to do going forward when the program's done? Or would you like to take a risk walk with me and have a soul intelligence session where we get to the root cause of what's been showing up for you and holding you back from being the leader you want to be in work and being the, inspired individual at home? Every single person took the soul intelligence session and took me up on my offer. And then I was like, okay, game on. I know this is the deal. And that's how I infused it into the work world. And then one of my executive coaching clients happened to be the CEO of a nutraceutical company that helps to produce incredible supplements and vitamins and healthy products for healthcare providers. And I started working and coaching with him and his leadership teams and realized, wow, the field of functional medicine is really where soul intelligence should live, because functional medicine doctors always start at the root cause, which most of the time is the gut. I'll talk to you about why I believe that to be true now. But they look for the root cause of dis-ease, and they're open to alternative therapies. And so that's really how I've been able to expand the soul intelligence method. So all of that to say, it is doing the inner work and then taking inspired action in the physical and asking for, what is that next step? What is that next step? And I ask that every step of the way.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And a lot of what I hear in what you just said also is this really uncanny ability to do 2 things. 1, trust yourself, and 2, to go for it. And, it's funny because I'm sure people have probably asked you this now that you've written a book, but, having written 4 books, people will come to me like, how do you write a book? I'm like, you sit down and write a fucking book. Like, that's how you write a book. How do you do a podcast? You sit down and write a podcast. How do you get in shape? You go to the gym and you change your diet and you do all the things. But the thing that I find that is most often missing for people in this equation that we're laying out is, 1, self-trust, the idea narrative that they're going to be okay. And then 2, just complete fear of ridicule and criticism from people who don't actually matter in the scheme of things, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so how do you navigate that part? And I'm asking this because you have to be kind of like dumb And I say that in like the kindest way. Like you gotta kind of be dumb to try to do crazy shit people have never done before. Because
Yeah.
smart people don't do it, right? Because we overanalyze and we look and we measure and we go, I don't know, that didn't work for that person or and all these thoughts and things come in. And so I kind of, even though I have a very high intelligence IQ, I make sure I turn that off and do dumb things, right? Things that I perceive as such, because I feel like if I'm willing to be seen by the outside world as I don't know what I'm doing, that's my superpower. I'm not
Mhm.
afraid to be embarrassed. Like I don't care. And it's the reason why I've been able to build success in my life as juxtaposed to being a child who grew up in an alcoholic drug addict home where everything was scrutinized. And in my teens, I pretended to be everything that you ever wanted to be so that I would be liked. And in my
Mhm.
20s, I chased everything everyone said that you should chase so that you care about yourself. And then I turned it all off. And so I've played both sides of this coin
Mhm.
personally, but I know that people have made so many mistakes and they've been wrong so many times, and they leverage those past experiences against their future. And they're so afraid. It's just deeply rooted fear about inadequacy, about not being enough, not being able to perform, not being able to have their ideas conveyed in a way that are actually practical, that they just don't even take the first step. It's weird because here's where I'm going with this. I
Mhm.
see people who are in this place where they trust themselves to the point of the game plan, of the prep, of all the spreadsheets, of all the things built, of everything being done, and never doing anything with it.
Mhm.
And so what I hear in you is you've been able to capitalize on this thing where it's like, I'm going to go ahead and do all of the back end things, but I'm also going to tell the world about it. And that's trusting oneself. So how do you get to that place? Right? Because you know as well as I do, there's people who will come to you, they'll work with you, and and I'm sure you do magical things with them, but prior to that, they don't even believe that it's gonna work, even though it works for you. So how do you trust yourself? I guess long question, very short. How do you trust yourself enough to do the thing that feels like your soul intelligence?
That's awesome. Um, well, I think first of all, it takes a little inner work, right? It takes some practice in developing that self-trust and really finding that within yourself. Where is that place? You know, I start out every session getting people to get focused on that divine inner light, that divine spark of animation within them, the eternal part of them. And so getting people in a space to receive, because when you're stuck at the bottom of the
Hmm.
scale, like Dr. David Hawkins did a book called Power versus Force. And in it, he illustrates how you can measure the frequency of emotions, right? I'm sure we've read the stories about, you know, you yell at a plant and it'll shrivel up. You know, you tell it good things and it'll bloom, right? It's energy. And so you can measure emotions like fear and guilt and shame, right? They're, you know, really down at the bottom of the scale. As a matter of fact, one of the best ways to pull yourself down is to shoot for perfectionism because it vibrates lower than fear. Okay. So my mom gave me a wise comment once: progress, not perfection. You know, and I remember that I was writing for um, actually Binney and Smith, who are the maker of Crayola crayons. I had a couple different jobs within that their media communications way back in the day. And I remember I was so upset because I had to rewrite an article 5 times. You know, I'm like, I must be an idiot. Da da da. You know, going into that old, I'm not good enough. And my mom said to me, and she was the manager of a hospital laboratory at the time, and she said, "Look, if I mess up, somebody gets the wrong blood in an operation, they can die. You mess up, what happens? Somebody gets a broken crayon on the box." So basically, you know, it's everything from visualizing internally, mentally, the best version of you. What does that person look like? What do they dress like? How do they act? What are they doing? So you have that mental image, and then bringing those feelings in as to how does that person feel? What am I experiencing and all the things that I want to do? And then it is taking the right action. in order to do that. And you started off this segment with talking about, what about people in your life that don't believe you, that hit you in the self-esteem. And one of the things I talk about, all the things that really contribute to dis-ease within the body, it's poor nutrition, something you mentioned. Believe it or not, most of what makes us ill, okay, is controllable. It's mostly lifestyle. The first one is poor nutrition, right? What are you putting into your body? It's kind of like a computer, garbage in, garbage out, right? So look at what you're putting into the body. Next thing, look what you're surrounding the body with, okay? Toxicity. That can be the chemicals in your house, something physical, to the people in your life. Like that person, you see their name come up on your cell phone and you just cringe because you don't want to pick it up. You know they're an energy vampire and you don't want to deal with it. It can be, what are you listening to? What are you watching? What are you putting into your mind? So lots of toxicity. Stress is the biggest factor, and we put ourselves into stress more than anybody else. We are addicted to stress. We operate on fight or flight most of the time. Movement, right? Sitting is the new smoking, okay? So movement is so important. And the last thing that causes any illness in the body is genetics. It is the smallest amount. It is about 5%. The rest of it's within your control. And I think people need to realize that we are creating the circumstances we are living in. And so I talk to people about levels of consciousness, okay? First level is life is happening to me. That is the victim, villain, hero, the situation, the story, the drama we all get caught up in. The next level, where most of us, I think, move to, is life is happening for me, where you start recognizing everything that happens in your life, right, as an opportunity to learn, to grow. What is this jerk of a person showing me about me, right? What am I allowing and accepting, as opposed to always making it about that person, right, or situation? So you start looking at life as life is happening for me, because we don't learn from the round corners. We learn from the sharp edges, right? The stuff that's hard. Then the next level is life is happening through me. And that's when you're in that flow state and you're really tapped in to what I call the divine, but a source greater than yourself, life force, if you will. And that's how I do my work in the world, right? When I'm doing a soul intelligence session, I allow that energy to come through me. It's the same way as when I'm writing. You allow that inspired idea, inspired thought come through you. And then the last one is life is happening as me. And that's those fleeting moments, maybe when you get the opportunity to be at a beach and you just get yourself lost in the sound of the waves, you almost feel like you're a particle in the water and you just dissolve and you really feel connected to everyone and everything. But those are fleeting moments, right? That's like Buddha on the mountain stuff, because the second you pull out into traffic, you're back down to the bottom. So you got to give yourself some grace. We're human and we are human beings. And I think we have been conditioned to be human doings. So really try and stay in the place of, okay, where's the opportunity for me, right? In that place. Life is happening for me and life is happening through me. If you can stay in those two states more of the time, you're going to manifest that which you desire.
Agreed. And I think it's about the trusting of yourself. Honestly, I feel like it's the same thing I talked about earlier. You want to trust yourself, do the things you say you're going to do. I just don't know of a better way to get to that place.
Well,
and I know that can be difficult for people because it's like you sit and you have this notion of like, I failed. And it's like, well, did you fail or did you learn? Because if you learned, you're probably not going to do the same thing again. If you do the same thing again, how many times are you going to do the same thing again before you stop doing the same thing again? And I think that's the game that we're playing, right?
Well, yes, for sure. But it's also interesting, right? You might divorce a spouse, okay? But then that same pattern may be reflected in a child, right? Because if you haven't healed it, it's going to show up somewhere else, or it could show up in your boss, right? The person, you may be having to solve old trauma at work or at home if you haven't really solved it. So just clearing your environment of that old stressor does not necessarily suggest that you're changing the pattern that you haven't healed too. So I
Yeah.
think it's, you really have to take stock of all of that in order to
Yes.
really tap in, right? And so
Absolutely.
we
And
talked about the stomach, right? You talked about self-esteem and who you are and how you show up in the world. And I just want to share one quick thing about the stomach, the gut. So when we in functional medicine, the first place a lot of doctors start is by healing the gut. And I find it fascinating because Hippocrates said years and years ago, 2000 years ago, that all health begins and ends in the gut. And it is our third chakra center, our solar plexus. So we have 7 major energy centers in the body. You being a yoga guy, I'm sure you know them, but you've got your root at the base of the spine. You've got your sacral, which is our sexual organs. I talked about the uterus and prostate earlier. So now I'm going to talk about the stomach and the gut. Our stomach in the physical realm has 2 functions: to store food and process food. Energetically, it's where we store emotions or process emotions, or we don't. And what the solar plexus represents is our self-esteem, how we show up in the world, how we feel about ourselves. And if you think about how powerful the gut is, you have to do a speech and you walk into, you're about to walk on stage, you get those butterflies, right, in your stomach. Or you walk into that stuffy cocktail party and you just cringe, right? You're feeling it. Or something really bad happens and you feel like a punch in the gut. That is because everything comes into that core center, our core center, and the sacral chakra. So it's really important. You talked about, you really nailed it. It's the self-esteem, how you show up in the world, how you feel about yourself. And if people just learn one thing from me today, I want them to realize that self-care is not selfish, it's sacred. And when you start healing yourself, as you have, Michael, you talked about your incredible physical, mental, and emotional transformation. When you start healing yourself, you don't know the impact you have on other people. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to write a book or have a podcast. It means the people around you. And I want you to remember, it's also like the butterfly effect. So the butterfly effect, if you've not read about it or know about it, the butterfly changes its pattern, of flight on one side of the world and it causes tsunami on the other. And that's because everything is connected. So in the best possible way, when you choose to heal you, you are actually helping everyone heal and consciousness elevate. And I think we forget that we're all connected and we have that impact.
yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that the more, actually, I know that the more that you choose to walk this path of figuring out who you are, even though it can be daunting and arduous, and there's days where you're just like, I don't want to do this. It's like, just keep going. You just keep going. And on the backside, the payoff is so much more than you could ever know because you're planting seeds for trees that you'll never sit under. And I think that's one of the really beautiful realities of this journey. And the fact that we are so interconnected now that more so than any time in history, that the decisions and choices that you make now will ripple for eternity. That said, before I ask you my last question,
Yes.
can you please tell everyone where they can find you, learn more about you, and walk their own journey of discovering their soul intelligence?
Oh, gosh, I would love that. Thanks, Michael. Yes, my website is soul, S-O-U-L, soul, intelligencemethod.com. And that's where most of my resources are. I host a free group session once a month, the first Wednesday of every month at 6 p.m. Eastern, so that people can have an experience of soul intelligence. It's a great way to get to know me and what I do, and really one of my major service offerings. I read a quote that said, don't just leave a legacy, how about live a legacy? And so that's part of my way of doing that. And I'm certainly available. My book is called Healing Through Soul Intelligence. It's available on Amazon, Kindle, Audible, and Barnes and Noble, pretty much everywhere. So I'm really excited about that. And I'm currently publishing my second book, which is called A Daily Dose of Soul Intelligence, which gives you a quote, a story, an inspired action, as we talked about today, and a journal prompt for every day of the year. So hopefully people enjoy that this year, or maybe consider giving the gift of soul intelligence to somebody else around the holidays. So I really appreciate the opportunity to spend time with you.
Yeah, it was amazing. Thank you so much for being here. And guys, please go to thinkunbrokenpodcast.com, look up this and more in the show notes. My last question for you, my friend, what does it mean to you to be unbroken?
I really think it's everything we talked about in this episode. I think it is truly using life as the opportunity to learn and grow. I think it's us to be able to reach our own potential and recognize that we're not broken. We're whole to begin with. And all we're doing is reclaiming parts of ourself that maybe we have given our power away to others. And we're bringing that back into ourselves so that we can operate in the world as the best version of who we truly are.
Brilliantly said. Could not agree more. My friend, thank you so much for being here, Unbroken Nation. Guys, thank you for listening. If this brought any value to your life today, please share it with a friend because somebody around you might need to go on their own soul intelligence journey. Until next time, my friends, take care of yourself, take care of each other, be unbroken. I'll see ya. Thank you so much for listening to Think Unbroken. Please share this episode with someone who could use it and help us move forward in our mission of ending generational trauma in our lifetime. And if you would, please take 5 seconds to pop on iTunes or Spotify, hit that 5-star, leave a review, and you can also reach out to us on social at Michael Unbroken or at Think Unbroken. And of course, you can check out our YouTube channel at Think Unbroken. Thank you for being a part of Unbroken Nation, my friends, and until next time, be unbroken.